Okay, so for this video, we're going to look at number 13 on the review and ignore this part right here that is incorrect. Okay, so this is going to be from section 1.5, which is our factoring. So on your review, these are kind of stuck together, so I spread them out so it would have a little bit more room to work. So remember, when you're factoring, first rule of factoring is GCF. So you want to see if there's anything that you can take out of that. Then once you do that, you can move on to other types of factoring. So if there's 4 terms, you will try grouping. If there's 3 terms, that's a trinomial. That's where you set up your parentheses. I usually refer to this as full backwards. And if there's 2 terms, you can check for a difference of squares or a sum or difference of cubes. And at any point, you may get down to something that no longer factors. All right, so if I look at part A, I'm looking for common factors. So if I look at 7 and 14, those are both divisible by 7, so I can pull out a 7. Then I'm going to take a look at my x's. So what I do here is I think about how many x's I can take out of both of those. So I can take out at least an x squared. So you go with the smaller exponent. And then when I look at the y's, I can see that I have y squared in both. So I'm going to take out the y squared. So 7 divided by 7 is 1. I don't have to write that. It looks like I've taken everything out of there. So if I take this whole expression and divide it by itself, I'm left with a 1. So you do have to put the 1 there. 14 divided by 7 is 2. Out of the x to the third, I took 2 of those x's out, so I have 1 left. I took all the y's, so no y's. All right, so this is all I can do with this one. When I get down to this part right here in parentheses, I don't have any squared terms, I don't have any common factors, so that's as good as that one gets. Now if we look at B, if I check for GCF first, 16 and 9 don't share common factors except 1, so I can't take anything out of there. So this is 2 terms, and notice I have a squared, so I might possibly have a difference of squares. So next I look for the minus sign, I see that. And the last thing I check is to see if 16 and 9 are perfect squares. And because they are, I know this is a difference of squares. Square root of 16 is 4, so I put 4's in the first spot. Square root of 9x squared is 3x. I put those in the back spots. And for a difference of squares, 1 is a plus, 1 is a minus. All right, so I don't have anything squared left. I don't have any common factors, so I'm done. Now if we move on to C, we do not have any common factors there. It's a trinomial, so I'm thinking about FOIL backwards. Notice my leading coefficient here is a 1. So those are the easy ones to factor where you don't have to do grouping. So I'm looking for numbers that multiply to be 49 and add to be 14. So those both need to be 7. So that'll just be x plus 7, x plus 7. I could also write that as x plus 7 squared. All right, so looking at D, if I look across, I have a common factor with 6 and 2, but this is a 1, so I don't have a common factor here. So for this one, I'm going to use my key number. So if I multiply 6 and negative 2 together, I get negative 12. And then my middle one is a 1, so I put a 1 here. So I'm looking for numbers that multiply to make negative 12 and add to make 1. So if I do 4 and 3 and make the 3 negative and the 4 positive, that would give me the positive 1 and it would multiply to give me the negative 12. So what I'm going to do here, since I don't have a leading coefficient of 1, I'm going to do factoring by grouping. So I'm going to split that middle term into negative 3p plus 4p. So I'm getting those numbers from right here. All right, and then I'm going to do my grouping. So I can take out a 3p out of the first group. That leaves me 2p minus 1. I can take a 2 out of the next group. That will leave me 2p minus 1. So remember, for factoring by grouping, if those match, you can continue. I can factor out the 2p minus 1, and then that leaves me with 3p plus 2. All right, so that one's fully factored. All right, so moving on to E. So I'm seeing cubes here. So this may be what we're calling a SOPS problem. Now, 2 and 16 are not perfect cubes, but we do have a GCF. So the first thing I need to do is I need to take out the 2. All right, so now I have 2 times a cubed plus 8b cubed. So I want to think of these as cubed. So I need something cubed, in this case a cubed, plus something cubed. So to cube 8, I need a 2, and to cube b, I need a b. So these numbers are important because this is what I'm going to put into my SOPS formula. All right, so I'm going to come over here. I'm going to keep the 2, and for SOPS, I'm going to split into 2 sets of parentheses. For the first set, I'm just going to copy these. So a plus 2b. I keep the sign, and I keep the numbers without the cubes. And then for the second set, this is where I'm going to do SOPs. So I'm going to start by squaring my first one, which is a, so that's a squared. Opposite sign will be a minus. Next, I want the product of a times 2b, so 2ab, and then a plus sign. And then I finish by squaring 2b, so I have to square the 2 and the b, and that'll be 4b squared. All right, so even though that's a little bit ugly, oh, don't want to do that. All right, I'm trying to erase without making a mess here. All right, so this will be your final factored answer on that one. All right, so let's try F. So I don't see anything common all the way across, but I notice I have 4 terms. So I'm going to try grouping 2 and 2. I can take out a 2x, and that will leave me 2 plus 3y. And here these are both negative, so I'm going to try to take out a negative 3, and that would leave me 3y. Negative 6 divided by negative 3 would leave me a positive 2. Now these need to match, so remember, for a sum, the order isn't important. So 3y plus 2 is the same as 2 plus 3y. So I can continue. I can write that either way, 2 plus 3y, and then 2x minus 3. Sorry, I've got this linked so my text show up on the video. All right, so let's try G. I don't have any common factors. I am seeing a minus sign here, and I have a z to the 4th. So since that's an even power, I want to think of this as a difference of squares. So the square root of z to the 4th is z squared. Square root of 81 is 9. For difference of squares, I get a plus and a minus. Now notice I still have squared terms, so I still need to go back and I need to look at both of these. So if I look at my signs, switch back here. If I look at my signs, I can't factor a plus. So this won't factor anymore. Right? I can't do a sum of squares, but this one will. Okay, so I'm going to bring down that first one that doesn't factor. Then z squared minus 9 is another difference of squares. So z plus 3, z minus 3. All right, so anytime you still have a squared term, you still have to give it another look to see if it'll factor. All right, so let's try H. Move up here. So I'm looking at H and I'm not seeing any common factors. I've got a nice coefficient of 1. So I want numbers that multiply to make 6 and add to make negative 3. Well, if I think about factors of 6, I've got 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. There's no way to add or subtract those in any way and get a negative 3. So this one is impossible, so we just say that it's prime. Will not factor at all. All right, moving down to I. I don't see any numbers that I can factor out, but notice they all have x's. And the other thing I don't like is that my leading term is negative. That makes it kind of hard to factor. So let's try taking out a negative x. That would leave me a positive 6 with an x squared. Now if I'm factoring out a negative, it's going to change that sign, so a minus 23x and a minus 35. All right, so now I want to think about factoring. So I need to get my key number, which will be 6 times negative 35. And that comes out to be negative 210. And then I want to find some combination that adds to be negative 23. So if you start playing with factors of 210, there's a lot of them, right? I could do like 21 times 10. I'm also thinking maybe 7 times 30 or 3 times 70. But if I look at 30 and 7, those would subtract to make 23. So that would be a good pair to use. I want it to add it to be a negative, so I need my bigger number, negative. All right, so bring down this minus x. And now we're going to take our middle term and we're going to split it. So I'm going to do a minus 30x and a plus 7x, and then bring down my minus 35. Okay, so these two numbers should add to make this one, and I'm getting those numbers from right here. All right, so bring down your negative x. Now I want to do my factoring by grouping. So I'm going to kind of keep some brackets here to help me out. I can take out a 6x. That will leave me x minus 5. With my last two, I can take out a 7, and that'll leave me x minus 5. All right, so factoring by grouping, I want my parentheses to match, and they do. So bring this up over here. I want the negative x. I'm going to factor out the x minus 5, and that's going to leave me with 6x plus 7. So all my x squareds are gone. I got rid of all my common factors, so that's fully factored. All right, so here's J. I don't see any common factors, so no GCF, but notice I have a cubed. So this is going to be a SOPS problem. So this is just going to be x cubed minus 4 cubed. So that's your first step, is to figure out what it is that you're cubing. So then when you write your formula, these are the numbers that you need. Okay, so I'm going to have a short set of parentheses and a longer set where I'm going to do SOPs. So for the short set, I'm just going to recopy without the cubes. So for the first S, I'm squaring the x, so x squared. I want an opposite sign, so that'll be a plus. Then I want the product of 4 and x, so 4x. Then a plus sign, that's supposed to be a p. And then I'm going to square the 4 to get 16. All right, so once you get it into the SOPs, this trinomial is not going to factor anymore, and you are done. All right, moving on to K. Noticing I got a lot of x's here. I can definitely take out an x. Looks like I can also take out a 2. So we'll do our GCF first. That'll leave me x squared minus 10x plus 21. All right, so I'm thinking about numbers that multiply to make 21 and add to make negative 10. So I'm thinking negative 7 and negative 3. All right, a negative times a negative would multiply to give me the positive 21, but they would add to give me the negative 10. So I do have a leading coefficient of 1, so I don't have to do factoring by grouping. I can go straight to my parentheses. I know I'm leading with x's. And then I just look here to get my numbers. I need a minus 7 and a minus 3. All right, so that one is fully factored. And our last one is our trickiest. This one is the fractional exponent. So what I want to do is I want to look at, just kidding, let me go back to my highlighter. Look at these common factors here. So I can take out an x minus 5, and then for the exponents, I want to take out the smaller exponent. All right, so I'm going to take out the negative 1/3 because that would be the smallest since it's negative. So I want to take out of both of these, x minus 5 raised to the negative 1/3. All right, so I'm taking all of this out of the first one, so that's going to leave me 3x. Now here I'm still left with the 4. And remember what I do to figure out this exponent is I'm going to do this exponent minus this one. So this will be 2/3 minus a -1/3. Well, that makes a plus, so I end up with 3/3, which is just 1. So that's my exponent right there. So since that's just x minus 5 to the first, I don't have to write that, but I am going to go ahead and distribute that 4. And this becomes 3x plus 4x minus 20. So in my final answer, once I've cleaned up these grouping symbols, you might want to just change them back to parentheses. It's okay if you leave them as brackets. And that's going to give us 7x minus 20. So that's a little unusual. That's kind of getting you ready for pre-cal, but that's how you factor with fractional exponents.